Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Don Brennan with Continuity Insights, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Observations from When the World Went Sideways, a Business Resilience Perspective, which will be a panel discussion featuring AliceKaltenmark, Lisa Jones, and Michael Hayes from the BCI USA Chapter. And also, I just want to let everybody know that today's broadcast is being sponsored by OnSolve. The past year has been full of learning and changing perspectives while raising a number of questions. For instance, where is the road taking us going forward, and what does resilience mean now? Today's panelists will share observations from their own experience in addition to some gleaned from the BCI's research. They'll dissect the evolution of resilience in today's pandemic and post-pandemic world, how it's changed perspectives, and how it's impacting strategic thinking and planning. Before we get started, I'd just like to review a few items with you. Throughout today's presentation, you will have the opportunity to submit questions by typing into the questions pane of your control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these. We may address some of them during the course of the discussion, but if we do not, we will address them at the conclusion of the webinar. I also want to let you know that today's webinar will be recorded for later on-demand viewing. And as a registered participant, you will receive a link to this recording. I would now like to introduce our panel. AliceKaltenmark joined the BCI USA Chapter Board as a voluntary board member in 2015 and is currently serving as the chapter president. Her professional experience spans over 20 years in business continuity and disaster recovery in the information solutions industry and over 40 years in IT. She currently leads the Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery Program for LexisNexis's infrastructure and technology operations and global technical resilience governance for the LexisNexis legal and professional division of RELX. Alice also serves as the treasurer and past president of the Continuity Professionals of Ohio. In recognition for Alice's many contributions to the resilience profession, she received the 2020 Carlson Wright Award from the CPO and the BCI's honorary FBCI Award in 2020. Lisa Jones is the secretary for the BCI's USA Chapter. For more than 13 years, she has been promoting resiliency and elevating contingency planning visibility. She readily shares insight on planning awareness, recovery strategies, and industry trends through thought leadership projects. She currently is leading collaborative efforts in building dynamic relationships between operations and technology for a global life sciences distribution and manufacturing organization. Lisa's goal is to ensure organizations recognize the value business continuity professionals provide. Michael Hayes is a manager of crisis management and business continuity for Arthur J. Gallagher and previously held business continuity and crisis management roles at the enterprise level with Walgreens and Sprint. Time and again, Michael has delivered critical leadership and forward-looking vision to enable organizations to maintain a proactive stance and minimize disruptions to day-to-day operations. He is currently serving on the board of directors for the BCI US Chapter and has contributed to America's Next Practice Group, and he is an active content creator for the chapter's social media channels. Please welcome AliceKaltenmark, Lisa Jones, and Michael Hayes.
Thank you so much for that great introduction, Don. We are thrilled to be with you today. And before we dive into it, I just want to say, number one, hello, and just give Lisa and Michael a chance to say hello as well. Not only does this so that you know whose voice is whose, but also do a little sound check to make sure we're all doing okay. So, Michael, you want to say hello?
Hey, thanks, Alice, and thank you everybody for joining today. I'm looking forward to having a great discussion with everyone.
All right. And Lisa?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, hi, everyone. And we have a lot to unpack, and I'm sure there will be a lot of amazing questions. So we're looking forward to our discussion.
Most definitely. So this is a discussion, and we thought about different ways we could go through this format today, and we thought it was best just to tee it up with a little bit of what some of the research has been saying over the past year of this interesting year that we've all lived through and are still going through this journey. But then we wanted to also hear from you. And so please do enter your questions into the questions panel there for the webinar, and so that we can answer your needs at the end of the session. So we're going to keep our comments hopefully sort of brief so that we have plenty of time for that interaction at the end of the session. So the BCI, we do a lot of research. That's one of the values that we bring to our members, and part of our vision in driving towards a more resilient world. One of the reports that came out late last year, and we actually did a webinar on this earlier this year, I think if I can remember right, December or January, and it was the future of BC. What is going to be happening? What do we see happening from this past year? And the research came back with 3 main points. It is resilience at the board level, and there's various amounts of discussion around that about boards are seeing the value of BC, business continuity, now more than ever before. But they're also getting confused between business continuity and crisis management. At the end of the day, though, they're seeing the importance of being prepared. So they're focusing on this, whatever terms they use around this space, they are looking at resilience for their businesses and their operations. One of the other key things that came out in this space is that the soft skills are more important than ever. It's that ability to communicate and convey the message and to translate the details of what's happening today and bring that back in a business view or a so what is the data really telling us. But being able to have that interaction at the board level is very important from a resilience standpoint, not only this past year, but where are we going in the future? So we see that resilience at the board level, their awareness and the focus becoming more to the forefront than ever before. The other thing is, and you'll notice that we're using the term resilience much more than we are using the term continuity, and that's on purpose. And it's because it's really not only continuity is, we continue operating, got that, but resilience is being, I just thought of the phrase, weebles wobble, but they don't fall down, baked from my childhood. But it's really being able to be truly resilient, that, no matter what comes at you, you're able to keep going. You may wobble a little bit, but you still stay the course. You may have to pivot and change your focus, but you still have that vision of where are you going in the future? What do you want to do with your company? What is happening with your staff? But it's being resilient and being able to weather the storm. And that showed clearly this past year, and it is important going forward. But to get that true resilience, it requires collaboration. It's I've said this many times in other sessions, and it continues to be true, is we do not have the luxury of time or space to be able to continue to operate in traditional discipline silos. And from that, I mean just business continuity or just risk management or crisis management, emergency management, pick your blank management phrase, and you can't operate in those silos anymore. We have to work together. Information security needs to work with human, HR, human resources needs to work with, the help desk. All of these different pieces and parts of any organization, whether you're for-profit, nonprofit, public, or private, requires you to collaborate together to be resilient. I can think of story after story of things that I've heard over the past year, the different things that various companies and organizations have been dealing with and figuring out how do I keep going. But it was by working together. And those companies and those organizations that not only survived but have thrived through this past year and going forward did it because they collaborated. So it is really important that we break those barriers down if they are even there. And then not only break them down, but then keep them down and out of the way so that we are working together for our common goal. I know in my business, it's in my company, it's I want to keep the business viable no matter what happens, so that all of my colleagues and myself continue to get our paycheck, but also not only is it about us getting our, our pay, which is why we work, obviously, but it's also what about the services that we're delivering, the impact that we're making into the community and into the business and the lives of others. So we need to collaborate. I think while the troops are seeing, let me see the point here, many departments now promote resilience, but the board involvement is still lacking. That may be true. And obviously it's true, or that wouldn't have been highlighted out of the report. But if you're getting that groundswell of the teams working together, then it's up to using those soft skills, growing those soft skills on how to convey that message up to the board so that they get oh, this is what matters. I've seen this happen this past year right before my eyes within my company, and it's been really great because of change in perceptions on how we are even operating as a business. And it's now understanding that all this work that we've been doing in years past, which may have been thought of as just compliance, check the box, improve our insurance rates, it's really making a difference in our ability to actually still survive and thrive in the current day. So yes, we are hopeful that the organization collaboration will increase post-pandemic. You know what, how for that to happen though, it's going to be up to us. It's going to be up to us continuing to get this message out and speaking to our colleagues in the workplace, getting that message out to the management teams, talking amongst ourselves like this today, where we're sharing our experiences, learning from each other, and making sure that that message gets out there in the broader environment. And then agility and adaptability. I think this one is probably the catchphrase that is at the crux of how any company or organization has survived this storm that we've been through this past year and are still dealing with. And that's that ability to think on our feet, pivot, and roll with the flow. I mean, those are terms that I use all the time in dealing with day-to-day operations, but it's been so true, is we need to be able to adapt to the situation that we have at hand and be able to, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. What do I do with it? How do I make it better? And how do we keep on going? That other phrase, don't let any good crisis go unleveraged. We're definitely in that space. We have 6 months before learnings become yesterday's news. So guys, guys and gals, gotta watch make sure I'm doing my diversity and inclusion language, and it's true. We need to make sure that we aren't just yesterday's news, that we stay in the forefront. And that's keeping our voices heard and keep the message going out and taking credit for the great work that we're doing, but showing that value not only to our peers, but to our business leaders. So that is the future of BC report findings. And by the way, later on, if not in the chat, then definitely in the email that Don will be sending out after the webinar, we'll include the links to the Future of BC report published late last year from the BCI, as well as the supply chain resilience report that was released just this last month, and the Horizon Scan report that was just released today. In fact, the Americas launch is happening at the same time that we're having this conversation with you. So we will be sharing that research with you. I encourage you to read that research. You will find good information in there that you can then take and leverage within your programs. And part of getting that message heard, use the research. The data says it does matter. So this is what the report said. Now, what is one of the observations that I have seen? I think that where we're at is a journey. Life is a journey. It's kind of one of my themes that I have in various conversations that I have with individuals. in organizations. But I think that what this past year has shown, and highlighted even more so than where we were before, is that we are on a journey from continuity to resilience, content or compliance to strategic advantage. In times past, a lot of more traditional business continuity programs dealt with more the compliance factor of, have you done your plan? Have you updated your plan? Have you exercised your plan? Which are all back to basics, fundamentals. You got to do it, but it's taken it beyond that check the box compliance and just making sure I've got a plan so I'm prepared for tomorrow, to actually now living that plan and actually adapting that plan to today's situation to where we are truly resilient. And now not only do we have this work that we've done, that we continue to manage these programs, but now we have actually made this a strategic advantage for our organization that we've, a prime example there are the companies that were able to pivot in a very short amount of time to deal with changing their whole product lines, because they changed their business to deliver the products that the people needed today. Distilleries, instead of putting out alcohol for enjoyment, recreational enjoyment, or self-medicating enjoyment, pivoted to making hand sanitizer because we needed it and we needed it now. That was a prime example, simple example of an organization being able to pivot and become a strategic advantage. So now they know they could change their product line. They could use all of their resources to turn around and deliver the product that's needed today. But they proved I've got agility, I can do this, and now I'm making a difference. So that strategic advantage, people will remember those companies that did that because now they have built their reputation. So it's not just about what you're doing to make money, but what are you doing to give back to your community and keep everybody running? So taking it from just a check the box compliance standpoint to moving this to a strategic advantage so that you can pivot, you can do things that make a difference, but also that you can grow and thrive in your companies. So I think you've probably heard my voice a lot and enough for the moment, and I'd like to get Lisa and Michael more involved. What we've got here are a few points of observations that we've made along the way in the past year or so, and we want to get into now. Let's have a discussion about these topics. So I'm going to tee off the first one, and then I'm going to open it up to Lisa and Michael to chime in. This first one is actually something I picked up in a webinar that I attended recently, and it's talking about, the value of planning, of doing your planning, and looking at the learning is in the planning. It's not about the document that captures the knowledge gained during the, just about the document, the end product of the plan, but it's about that knowledge you gain during the process that it truly enables resilience. So I want to throw Michael and Lisa, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
So let me start off. This is like the most perfect statement ever, particularly for us as practitioners. We have a macro view of our organization, and we are open to so much knowledge about what our practices and our business functions are, particularly in organizations. And we know them. We hate to talk about it, but there's these things called silos that people tend to have to deal with. I know every organization shares everything. I know they do, but every now and again, not my organization, but there's some organizations out there that actually have siloed departments. And as practitioners, we provide that value of showing this department does this, but hey, did you know that this department over here is not as critical? But Department A, we rely on that department to do our businesses or services, whatever it may be. So we have that opportunity from that macro view to provide that learning just in this planning and getting these departments to talk to each other. Prime example from an old organization I worked with, one of our one of our functions, or critical functions, dealt with processing claims. Everyone knew that that was the great big thing that needed to be done, yet we didn't account for the mail center not being a critical function, because although I would say 70% of our claims were electronically, we still had those that still came through the mail, and we had we were, you know, deemed by the state to have them processed within 3 days. So just having that conversation, just being hopefully, or it was fortunate for me to be in the room when that conversation started, but to be able to bridge that gap and show those interdependencies, those are something that we learn just from doing our job. And when we do our job well, we're able to present those things to our board to say, these are the things that we should be looking at. I mean, yes, these are some of the things or departments that need to be, you know, considered in our planning. So I think this is something that we will continue to learn as we continue to bridge the gap between departments.
Yeah, and you know,
Couldn't agree more.
kind of piggybacking off what Lisa said, you know, I think COVID was a great exercise for us in this context, because if you think about the dependencies of other departments, business processes, technology, having a global impact to the supply chain and different services and things like that, you really started to realize, well, that team that you thought maybe wasn't a critical function, the vendor that they're using might be based, let's just say, in Mexico, and they're processing coupons or whatever for your company. So, I mean, at the end of the day, if they're down and, you know, sheltering in place and they don't have the infrastructure or resources to continue the work, it trickles back up to the company. It's the same thing with tearing down the silos. A lot of times when you look at the learning or from your different plans, you're able to share that learning when you tear down the silos. You know, so your division, your department might be having an impact today that other people in your company could learn from, or, you know, that would prevent a large disaster by sharing those learnings, you know, sharing the after action information and things like that.
Definitely. It's, you know, you learn. One of the things I like about doing the business impact analysis, and part of what I love doing about business continuity, is you get to know the whole organization, you know the business. And as we learn about the business, then that helps us develop the plan. But then also when stuff happens, when the world goes sideways, because we've done this work, we're able to then help advise of, well, this is what we can do. Here's our options, because we've understood the big picture and really taken it through. Which takes me to the next point. Resilience is a strategic objective. I think this is one thing that I'm seeing more and more, and from a daily operational management metrics perspective, like within my own company, that our main focus is delivering information solutions and analytic solutions to legal and professional markets. It's all online. It's all technology. It's delivering content to our customers in a way to help them do their jobs better and to deliver for their clients. But they can't do it if we're not available, if our products aren't there. We have to always be there. So when I say a strategic objective, resilience is because we have to have a strategy of that always on architecture, that always on capability. And, you know, our customers can be sympathetic, you know, any business, but they need you now. They don't need you tomorrow because you're dealing with a problem today. That's fine, but our competition is a mouse click away, literally. And that is so true for so many businesses. And especially we learned that even this last year, that the brick and mortar stores that were not already able to do online shopping and delivery and all that goes there. I could get on a whole nother spiel talking about all of that, because I do my part to support the overall global economy. But anyway, if they hadn't had that ability to pivot and be ready and be looking out ahead and have that resilience architecture in place, they struggled. And unfortunately, many of those businesses are not going to survive this past year because of what has been demanded, because their competition literally is a mouse click away.
Yeah, and I would just say, just
Go
to
ahead.
add to that, I would just add to that that it's also, it's unacceptable. The culture has changed us to make this unacceptable. We are a microwave, 2 minutes or less culture now. I mean, it's unacceptable that
instant
you can't
gratification.
pivot. Yes, exactly. So we have no choice. I mean, it was acceptable in the beginning, just within our profession, to be very tactical. You know, step by step, you follow the rules, you follow the steps, and everyone was fine with that. You know, from okay, I'm probably dating myself, but remember when everything was closed on Sundays? Everything was closed on Sundays, and that was acceptable. You didn't do anything on Sunday. Now, God forbid if anything is closed, even on Thanksgiving, but that's a whole nother discussion. So companies have no choice than to be resilient and be strategic in their process. We saw that from little mom and pop shops who had to pivot from selling their food, people coming in to sell in order, and then changing to, having a robust delivery service, or companies that were looking to raise money decided to focus on their profitability. Everyone had to make a major shift, and it was quick. Normally we take months and years to have these three-year strategic plans, no longer. So in resilience is the same thing. It's important to do a BIA. Can we take the amount of time that we used to do a BIA? Probably not. But yet the value in it is still important. So we need to, now I haven't figured that out yet, how to make it shorter. I'm working on it. So if anyone has ideas, please let me know. But it's still value in those things, to be more strategic and less tactical.
Definitely.
What I was thinking, as we're discussing this, it's that always on, that instant gratification, especially what we've seen over the past 12 months. It makes the business have to go back and look at their business processes and their RTO, RPO, maximum tolerable downtime, whatever you call it, because in the age of social media and all of those things right now, those few minutes that you're down, at least if you're not giving out a statement, and I'll use an example of what happened the other day with Google and anybody that had Android devices, and that it was a back-end app that was crashing. People don't expect Google to go down. They don't expect to not be able to access Gmail or other apps or things like that. And as I was looking through their support Twitter and other feeds, there was no official statement from them saying, hey, we know there's a problem, at least to the customer. I saw statements on like Wirecutter and different, websites and articles and things. But I mean, people literally lose their minds when they cannot use their phone. They can, especially when you're a small business and you need access to that information and your clients, and folks will jump ship in a heartbeat now. There is no really brand loyalty, things like that. It's whoever can give me what I need when I need it, or I'm going to find it somewhere else.
Very true. It's that you're right. No brand loyalty it's. In fact, loyalty is a totally different term that we could probably spend another hour talking about, but just in talking the cultural, generational differences and so forth. But just all that we've said right now really takes us into this next statement, that resilience needs to be baked into the very fabric of the organization and the technology. It's, we need to be taking it. It's not just about saying, well, what I do if an email's down, well, I'm going to go do this or that. Those are parts of it, but you've got to have it into the very lifeblood of the organization of what am I going to do when stuff happens? And, we can get into the theoretical conversations about, don't do scenario-based planning, et cetera. You got to do it scenario-based planning, all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't really matter what the issue is. What causes the disruption is that you've got to have it baked into the very way the business runs, how the organizations talk with each other. I think going to remote-based working this past year has really highlighted where businesses had baked into the fact of physical proximity to your colleagues, that you are sitting right next to each other. And so you could do it on a piece of paper and just hand it over the wall. Well, that can't happen anymore because, we now have to be able to do everything virtually. And that if you hadn't already been doing this work before, to start baking this resilient mindset into your organization's culture, I think we all learned a lot about that. And it's those that are thriving now. I think you can tell which businesses have thrived in this space and which ones haven't. And just to kind of talking about some of the things that we were talking about with mouse click away, I heard a statistic from a business continuity person at Amazon specifically, where a lot of companies were dealing with loss of staff because of all the restrictions and so forth of how trying to keep everybody alive. Amazon actually had to hire 150% of their staff. And they grew by 150% of resources of people to do the work to meet up with the demand. So they made, they did well as a business, but did they have the ability to do that within the business? Yes, they did, or they could not have responded. So it was, I know a few of the folks there, and I know that they have really worked hard to bake in resilience into that very fabric of the organization. And it's paid off throughout the past year. So just a couple of little examples that then take us into the digital transformation. This is the one thing I think that just speaking of remote working and what we've all lived through this past year is a lot of companies were on a more of a long-term self-paced process to move into the digital transformation where they moving everything out, necessarily not on-prem on their own premises with their own data centers, et cetera, moving things out into the cloud and using software as a service. Many companies are at various stages all along that way, but we went from having this as, yeah, I want to get there eventually, but I'm not ready to let go of that control just yet. I'm not ready to just let that part of my business out of my direct control. So there was, some companies were taking a slower approach than others. To overnight, we were faced with this requirement. We had to get everybody set up to remote work from home. Unless you had to be physically on premise to do a physical task, like you're in manufacturing, you can't do that all from home. Or healthcare or direct services couldn't do that from home. You had to go on premise. But for most of us that work in the corporate world, we were able to go home. But if our companies weren't there already to make that happen, they had to make it happen rapidly. So what's interesting, and this was a statistic that I had heard recently as well, was that many Fortune 500 companies were still in the process of transitioning their staff to remote working in June and July of last year, that they weren't able to pivot quite well. I know with my company, we were really quite pleased that we were able to go from a predominantly on-premise organization where everybody, used to call it butts in the seat. Everybody had that butt in the seat. That's not probably the right terminology to use, but it was what was called. And it went from that to where it was, I would say, probably 85% of our staff were on premise in an office somewhere, to literally within a week, spun that around to 98% were working from home. That's an organization of 30,000 people around the globe. So not the biggest organization, but we were able to do that because we had been more aggressive about our digital transformation for our enterprise, not only for our products, but for our enterprise services, that the lifeblood that keeps the business running. We were positioned to do that, and we were able to procure the equipment for our staff and expedite a lot of that for our colleagues that say in Manila. There was a little bit more of a challenge. It took us a little bit longer, but we were able to get them set up and doing that. But again, that's what has allowed many companies to thrive as well as survive. Michael, what are your thoughts about the digital transformation?
And I'm glad you brought it up, because it goes back to earlier when I had mentioned kind of the global supply chain issue, and then even the technology and baking resiliency into the fabric of the organization. Digital transformation is a great example. You no longer are worrying about the one facility and the redundancy of communications and things like that into the facility. Just like you said with your company, you now have 30,000 offices remotely. And so not only do you have to worry about, can my data center, can my VPN stream and tunnel handle that remote work? That was one thing that a lot of companies were starting to think through. But for those companies that did not have the remote technology, like you said, you're now going against the entire globe in almost every business that is trying to go remote to get monitors, to get laptops, to get desk phones. And it really was interesting to see what companies could pull it off and other ones that struggled. And you weren't only battling with companies, you were battling with healthcare, or with not healthcare, but higher education, and even with the K through 12. I mean, they trying to procure all these devices for your kids to be able to do their schoolwork remote. Goes back to, we really need to make sure that we're understanding the future and what comes next, and how do we make sure that our business can run. And even if there's going to be an upfront cost or investment, we have to take that, because the next disaster that we have like this, which there is going to be a next disaster, the businesses that can pull it off and fulfill digital transformation and keep looking to the future and keep trying to work on how do I better serve my clients and my employees are going to survive, and the others aren't, because there can't be another mad scramble like this. Especially, as we get more and more into this remote work and more into the instant gratification and I want it now, because now our customers are used to it. They're used to this, hey, I can do buy online, pick up in store, and I can have it delivered to my house within the same day, or all of these things. We have given them that service no matter what industry you're in, and now we have to continue to fulfill it, and we have to continue to look at staying technologically advanced, because our competitors are going to beat us out if we don't.
Exactly.
That is so true.
And even in those organizations that have to be brick and mortar, they've used digital transformation in how they do business, from doctors who do more teledoc and over and online to see their patients, to also when you think of hospital organizations, they've implemented electronic health records systems that control everything within a hospital, so they can easily share documents and information. From a manufacturing and distribution insight, using some type of enterprise warehouse system to monitor what is in the warehouse, how we're shipping things out, and moving a whole customer. Who would have thought of customer service being remote? I mean, no one ever thought. When you thought of a call center, you thought of being in a call center talking to people. I mean, literally, that just went remote. That was something I never fathomed. I knew it could happen, but never thought about it actually happening. So having that digital transformation, everyone has to invest in, and everyone will and you haven't invested in it, you're feeling the pain if you can still survive through it. So it's very important.
Oh, no doubt. It's actually, I think we've just scratched the surface on this, and where is this going to be going? And this is going to have long-term impacts to so many different facets of our economy and our way of life going forward. You're right. We've had this taste of the work-life balance of being able to work from home versus going into the office. There's pros and cons, and that's another whole session just right there. But what are the long-term impacts to corporate real estate?
That's what I was going to chime
What
in and
companies?
say.
Yeah, because I know
Talk
with our
about
my
resilience. Yeah, talk
company,
about resiliency right there. I
yeah,
mean, that's an industry. What are you going to do when all these companies start consolidating their footprint? You know, realizing, hey, I don't need as many offices, or I don't need
yes,
dedicated space. I can do hoteling, or, you know, is this the resurgence of WeWork and, you know, those type of
yeah.
companies that have the co-leasing space? I mean, it's going to be very interesting for the commercial real estate market.
It really is, and it's yeah.
Or the I was just gonna say, or the brick and mortar shopping malls. I have a shopping mall that's near me, and to walk through that mall is almost like walking through a ghost town, because I would say at least 30 to 40% of that mall is closed. All those stores decided just to go online. So what is going to happen to that? I'm sure they'll probably finally tear it down, build houses, and that's it. And then there's congestion.
Probably.
So that's a whole other thing.
But you know, that brings up this flows then into the next point about being in doing our resilience planning and looking at this, being location agnostic. So much of what we've done traditionally has been site specific about the specific facility and the various risks and so forth within that facility. Now, you made this point earlier, Michael, and folks, I keep looking to this side because that's where I see their pictures instead of on this side, which is where my camera is. So and I have to see your face when I'm talking to you. But being location agnostic, we now have 30,000 offices instead of 10 or whatever that case may be. So this really gets us to the point of something that I've been doing in my own program, of doing the planning at a global basis and not so much about where the staff are. I need to know the details of where I have staff located, so I'm aware of when things are happening, like weather events are happening or other events are happening, so I can respond to the needs or anticipate the needs of my employees in the various locations. But now we need to just really get back into that knowing the business and not so much about the site plan, but let's focus on the functions and the capabilities. And if we start really doing that pivot and how we look at resilience programs within our companies and our organizations, I think we're going to start seeing even more value out of this, where we can really, you know, the learning is in the planning. It's really being able to take it from being location specific to being more about functions and capabilities, so we do understand how the flow of work goes throughout the organization. How do we do the stuff that we do, and actually look at optimizing our processes, look at growing more efficient, therefore releasing more resources to do new stuff, to do more innovation. So what have you seen in that space? Are you seeing value in those areas to get away from so much the specific site and getting more on the functions and capabilities?
I would say, you know, and I'm dealing with that exactly right now. So, you know, we have a lot of our plans are site-based, and, you know, the business process at that site and things like that. But as more and more team members go remote, it's like, well, what plan do we include them in? Because do they get included in the plan of their nearest office because they may report into somebody that's in California, but they live in Wyoming? So do we tie them into the Wyoming plan, or do they get tied into the office that they actually are, you know, the manager, their vision, their support works out of? The other thing to think about on it that is really important is when you think about the way we've done planning, and it's been a mixture across the board. I've been involved where we've done it at the process level, we do it at the site level. We're really, I think, going to have to go back to the process and really do the BIA and look at the process, because again, we don't have those physical locations. We're probably not going to have as many physical locations, and you can't do 30,000 BIAs. if you turn to, you got to get away from the location base, and you got to get to the process.
You don't want to do 30,000 BIAs? You sure?
Yeah.
Hey, with AI and bots out there, who knows what we'll be able to do in a few years? But I've already got enough with the large amount of plans that we have, and just trying to figure out what makes sense for the business. And that goes back to the global supply chain and things like that. When you get more and more people that are working remote, some people have unique equipment they need, whether you need specific check printers or things that typically would be secure within that business that you're not having in somebody's home. And now you've got a printer that can print checks for the company that's in somebody's basement. And then you have to worry about not only the risk to the business from that, but the security aspect, the physical security aspect, and things where, you're used to having alarms and card readers and things like that, for sensitive information at your business. Well, you can't, how are you going to implement that across your employees and make sure that, it's an ask. It's an ask to say, hey, make sure you keep the sensitive information locked up and away from prying eyes. But I don't think we're not gonna be able to police it. And I think that's gonna go into a whole other part of resiliency and more into the risk and, more of the malicious software attacks and things like that. And I think even just more, if you think about corporate espionage and stuff, it's a whole other risk world to look at if we stay in this remote environment.
Yeah, and from a manufacturing distribution perspective, we have the hybrid of more crisis management, site-specific type of planning. Yet we are moving towards more global strategic process planning. So I think there has to be a hybrid within both. I think for our sites, we're very crisis management specific, I think, but overall, what our true missions is for our organization is very process driven and very function driven. So, a hybrid of both is what will happen, particularly for a global organization. I think we need that hybrid approach.
I agree. In other words, let's do what makes right for our organization today and coming forward. It's just do the right thing. And and recognizing that every company and organization is different, and that we're different at, throughout the time. Our needs change, and we need to ebb and flow with that and be agile and adapt as we go forward. Let's touch base lightly on this last topic before we open up for going to Q&A. I'm just keeping track of our time. And I know when we were getting prepared for this session today, we talked about the company's duty of care for the employees. Where do we draw the line? How far is the company responsible for the employees' well-being while in their home? And this was an interesting topic. So instead of me saying a lot, I want to hear from you too.
Well, I think this will continue to evolve. Just like Michael said about having that sensitive information in your home. Is my basement considered an office now? Is it considered part of the organization? And how do I secure sensitive data or sensitive documentation? If I had children who were constantly around pulling papers and I don't know what this is, or coloring on it, that would be a whole big thing. Fortunately, my kids are grown, but that's a whole nother story. So I think this is constantly evolving. I think think about the active shooter or all those those type of scenarios that we thought about and that we planned for. Well, those things can happen in someone's neighborhood now. Now people can be stalked in their own homes. How much of that do we take on as an organization? And so I think I don't have the answers for this, but I think this is evolving, and I'm curious to see what will come out of it as more people start to work remotely.
And I say, you hit a good point there about like the violence and things that could happen. You've got more locations to worry about, but let's take it to the next level in domestic violence. So now that you're at home and things like that, and technically that's their office, does that fall within your scope of investigations and duty of care? If they were sitting in your corporate office in the building and somebody came in and, their spouse or significant other, and they had that domestic violence, yes, you would be involved. You would be doing something on it. They're trespassing, they're coming onto your property, but now they're in their own home. And how does that work? And just like you said, I don't think we're going to have a perfect answer for this. I think there's going to be a lot, especially off the lessons learned and data that comes out of all of these, everybody that's been working from home in the different company sectors. It's going to be very interesting to see, not only on the continuity and resilience side, but on the security and the safety side, where do we go next? Same thing goes for, we're now monitoring more home locations to send emergency notifications, whether you're about tornadoes or floods or things like that. You no longer are worrying about that actual one physical office. You're worrying about everybody in that community, because you now have multiple offices within your community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And also dealing with then the effects on your staff from having to work remote and no longer having the community in the workplace. And I know and this was actually brought up. I was just reading it in the Horizon Scan report today about the focus on mental health and employee assistance programs. And it's so, so it's looking at that duty of care, not only about the safety, physical safety, but the well-being and mental health of our employees, because the dynamics have changed. So, and it all starts with, let's have the conversation. Let's not try and, just ignore it and go on, we'll deal with it. But no, we really need to recognize that we need to have the conversation. And it really is putting the importance on not only the management, but also the employees about, it's also in the workplace of, I'm seeing my colleagues struggling. We need to, maybe you need to go talk to them or something. It's really truly being taking care of each other as well. We have actually used up the majority of our time already. So while I can keep on talking about all of these topics, I think it's time to hear from our audience. So I am going to ask Don to do the honors, and let's hear what the questions are.
Okay, thank you, panel. Great discussion, really great topics there, and a lot of super insight. Let's jump into a few questions since we're running out of time. This one came in early on, and the question was, what functional organization or department or executive title do you see becoming responsible for overall resiliency versus continuity?
It's a good question, and I think it just depends. It depends on your organization and what's right for your business. I'm seeing chief resilience officer showing up in some places.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing that it's, business continuity is coming in through the risk management firm, which typically falls within the finance team. I'm seeing some things happening in HR. It really just depends on what works for your business, is what I've seen. A lot of people would like to see that chief position, but I don't know that it really is so much about having that position as opposed, the title is opposed to having a seat at the table to have the conversation.
Yeah,
Michael,
I think it's still, I think still predominantly it still runs from your IT, from the IT space. Yet there seems to be more collaboration with your risk, your enterprise risk and compliance, because was always thought of as check the box type of thing. I think as we were evolving from COVID, I think it'll be less check the box and more, more the collaborative part of it. But I think it still will always be run out of IT just because of the technology piece of it. But I think we are seeing the evolvement into risk management and into, security. So that's my thoughts on there. And Michael?
I honestly, so most of the organizations I work with, we fall either in security or operations. So if you think about it, at the end of the day, it could fall under your chief operations officers, your COOs and things like that, because they're the ones that are managing the business and rely on the assistance from the technology, from human resources, from the vendors, from supply chain and things like that. So, getting away from finance, I could see it falling in the operations world too. So like Alice said, it's really, how is your business? How does it work with your business? Are you more technology driven? Are you more operationally driven? I think that's the first question to ask. And then, whether it's, hey, just give me a seat at the table and let's bring the right parties together and tear down the silos. Or do we really need that chief leader to do that for us?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, panel. Next question. Earlier, you referenced a part of someone's pandemic plan, but I'll repeat it. You provided a good example of resilience by mentioning distilleries that pivoted to producing hand sanitizer. I assume this was not their pandemic plan. What should professionals be doing to enable organizations to quickly pivot or take drastic action in response to unpredictable events and consequences?
I think this gets back to where we talked about focusing on functions and capabilities. This was a situation where they had the capability to create something. It was just changing, tweaking this or tweaking that to turn out a different product, and recognizing that they had the skills, they had the resources, and they even had the raw product to do, to make something different to meet the demand. So from my perspective, when I just think through it, it was just having that realization that they had that capability. Another example is the number of manufacturing plants that switched from making, say, cars or car parts and other types of, physical products to making respirators. That was, again, they had the raw materials, they had skills, they had the machinery, the resources, they had the engineering skills to understand how to retool and make something different. So it's, again, having a good understanding of what your functions and capabilities are, so that then when you're posed with a new problem, you can say, oh, I can do this. Michael, Lisa, what do you think?
I would say it's also, this really brings into light the public-private partnerships, and really understanding the communities you serve and the needs that they have. Because again, we look at, you talked about the respirators being made or switching to the hand sanitizers. A lot of that was because it was things that we needed within the community. But if you're not involved in those public-private partnerships at all levels of government, you don't understand what products, what services you may be able to offer because your company has the expertise, the raw materials, or things like that to meet that need.
And also also understanding the event that is happening. Prime example, clothing. Women are not wearing dresses. I'm sorry, we're not doing this while we're sitting in front of the television. But what was important? Organizations and retail companies that said, okay, we are going to speed up this active wear, leggings and joggers and people working out at home. So, having that foresight, those companies were able to pivot. People are not going to stores. So what are those, what are those things that people want? Pajamas. Oh my goodness. That was like, please.
It's understanding your markets and what the needs are. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Okay, we're just about out of time, but let me try and squeeze in one last question. The question is this: our organization's collective intelligence, like a community of bees, has learned from prior experiences to build on the organization's resilience. Our first real remote work collective experience was during the polar vortex of 2019 in the Midwest. Wondering, our listeners wondering if any of you have had similar experiences.
Oh, I think of it's a little bit farther back in history, but we called it Snowmageddon. This is back in the like 2011, 2012,
Yep.
somewhere in that. If I remember, it was a long time ago, but the whole East Coast was under snow and ice. And so they all had to go working from home. And in my company, our VPN infrastructure melted. It went into meltdown overnight because we didn't have the capacity to handle that many people working from home. So we lesson learned. We revamped our VPN architecture, changed it, and made it so that it could expand and contract so that when this event happened and we had to take everybody home overnight, we didn't bat an eye because we knew our VPN architecture could handle it. Now where we've grown beyond that is that we've now moved the security down out of the walls of our infrastructure or network infrastructure and brought it out closer to the client end so that we don't even have to VPN in anymore. Unless you need to get into a physical resource that's within the company network, we can do everything outside of the network. So that is a situation where we've learned and improved and now are better positioned going forward. So yes, you've got to let's checkpoint and take those lessons learned along the way. Don't wait till we're out the way end of it. And as you can see, this one's taking way too long. We can't wait to get all of our lessons learned at the end of it. We have to take our checkpoints along the way, and let's continue to evolve and adapt and grow as we go forward. And now we are way out of time, Don. So you want to wrap us up, and I'm going to just go down to a couple of more slides just to let you know what's in the deck. Some additional points we didn't get to. We had these in case we ran out of things. So things for you to think about for maybe next time. Our contact information is here. If you want to learn more about BCI and the USA chapter, we'd love to talk to you. And I want to thank you all for your time. This has been a great time. I've enjoyed it. And thank you so much,
Yes,
Don and OnSolve, for hosting us today.
Okay, well, I want to thank you, Alice, Lisa, and Michael for sharing your thoughts with us today. A really great discussion. Obviously, I think we could have gone on for a couple more hours. You had excellent insight, and I think everybody appreciated that for investing the time today. I just want to let everybody know that Alice had up on the screen there quickly our speakers, all of them, their LinkedIn profiles. They would love to hear from you if you do have additional questions. I also want to let everybody know, as I mentioned before, I will be posting a recording of this webinar on my website tomorrow, Continuity Insights, and you'll be receiving an email from me tomorrow with that information. Additionally, as Alice promised, I will be providing links to the BCI research that was touched upon today. That includes the Future of Business Continuity, the BCI Supply Chain Resilience Report, and the just released BCI Horizon Scan Report. So once again, thank you, Alice, Lisa, Michael. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. And I want to thank everybody for joining today's discussion, Observations from When the World Went Sideways, a Business Resilience Perspective. On behalf of Continuity Insights and our corporate sponsor, OnSolve, we hope you enjoyed today's presentation, and everybody please enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.